Chairman Shlomo Dovrat, distinguished guests, friends all, thank you for the very warm welcome back to Tel Aviv, and thank you to the Aaron Institute here at Reichman University for hosting us here today, and thank you so much to all of you for coming. Now, given that there is one speaker who is pulled out, I think that this clock going from 10 to 0 needs to be expanded a bit, because the ambassador has told me I needed to speak for longer. So I'm just mindful of the instruction to stop at 0. So I'm just giving you advance warning there that I might breach that particular instruction. I've been in Israel here over these past few days to launch the 2025 Economic Survey of Israel and to discuss its findings and its recommendations with ministers in the government, with the central bank governor and various other key stakeholders. And it's great to have the opportunity also to speak to you here today. And of course, this visit is also the opportunity to mark the 15th anniversary of Israel's membership of the OECD. It's an important milestone in our engagement with each other, and I'm very grateful to the delegation of Israel at the OECD for having taken the initiative, working with the Aaron Institute and Reichman University to put together this seminar today to mark it. Israel has been on a very impressive growth trajectory, displaying exceptional resilience even in the most difficult of circumstances. Over the past 2 decades, just looking at the numbers very objectively, Israel's per capita GDP has grown by 46%, a much faster rate than the 27% average across the OECD over the same period. And despite the severe economic and social impacts following Hamas's horrific terrorist attacks on October 7 and all the other interconnected conflicts across the broader region that have continued to develop since then, we are looking at continued strength in Israel's economy, with growth of 3.4% this year and a strong 5.5% next year, which is very impressive even in what I would sort of say normal circumstances. As the Israeli economy has continued to expand, the unemployment rate has continued to come down to now be one of the lowest unemployment rates across the OECD. In fact, since 2010, the unemployment rate in Israel has declined by 5 percentage points and reaching a very low 2.7% at the end of 2024. In fact, if anything, Israel is feeling the pressures of growth, and is feeling the pressures of growth in its labor markets with increasing levels of labor shortages across important parts of the economy. A tight labor market and persistent labor shortages are a constraint and are holding back even stronger economic activity, in particular in the construction sector, where activity remains well below its pre-October 7 levels. So one of the key recommendations that we are making to the government, and it's not a new recommendation, it's a recommendation that we have made before, but we do believe that there is a structural challenge here that will need to be tackled over time, also given some of the demographic trends within Israel. The government should persist with efforts to boost workforce participation by underrepresented groups in the population, and as required through programs to attract more foreign workers to accelerate residential construction, for example. When improving labor market participation would provide a strong boost to growth, and let me say that labor market participation of the Israeli population in aggregate is actually on par with that with that across the OECD. But when you look at the different segments of the population, the non-Haredi Jewish population has a participation rate well above the OECD average, both men and women, in particular women. But then when you look at the workforce participation levels of Haredi men and Arab Israeli women, they are very, very low, and of course bringing down the average. And given the level of population growth in those segments of the population, it really is a structural challenge that will need to be tackled somewhere along the way, or it will cause a constraint on growth moving forward. A comprehensive approach to improving access to the labor market should include removing subsidies that discourage labor market participation and providing high-quality education across all population groups. This should include conditioning school funding on teaching the full core curriculum and ensuring adequate funding per pupil, taking into account schools' socioeconomic characteristics and particular needs. Attracting foreign workers and also to make up for some of the loss of workers, for example, out of the West Bank, would help accelerate residential construction and would be particularly important to keep downward pressure on housing prices against the backdrop of Israel's relatively strong population growth. Israel does have access to a highly skilled workforce, in general, thanks to quality academic institutions and, of course, also a quality academic institution like this one. But Israel could do even better, and in a way, given the needs of the labor market, needs to do better. I mean, in 2023, 50% of people aged 25 to 64 in Israel had obtained a tertiary degree, above the OECD average of 41%, and Israel's vibrant high-tech sector has been and will continue to be a key driver of growth and opportunity. When you look at the high-tech sector here in Israel, it employs 12% of Israel's workforce, produces an incredible 20% of Israel's GDP, accounted for 40% of its growth over the past 5 years, and more than a third of Israel's tax revenue is generated by people and businesses working in the high-tech sector. These are very impressive numbers, and the success of this part of the economy is in part due to a flexible approach to regulation that should be maintained and to continue also to foster a dynamism when it comes to the development of AI. However, the economy would benefit from more widespread diffusion of AI across sectors, especially the non-high-tech sector here in Israel. Only a comparatively low 4% of all firms in Israel adopted AI technology compared to 8% in the OECD on average. Now that might sound counterintuitive because you export this exciting high-quality technology into countries all around the world, but whereas in many areas where Israel has achieved significant innovation, like advanced water management techniques, which Israel has been exporting on the basis of utilization and experience here in Israel. When it comes to AI, you are exporting innovations, but not as yet using them to their full potential in your own domestic economy and society. And partly that is also related perhaps to a skills gap in the population more generally. I mean, you have quite a dual system. Those who benefit from the best education have world-class education, but it does drop off, and it's uneven when it comes to the quality of education across the board, and there's certainly a job to be done in terms of improving the quality and the access and the quality of education in a more general sense across the population as a whole. Addressing gaps in the education and lifelong learning systems would promote digital skills among the workforce and help foster a greater AI uptake in the domestic economy here in Israel. And the deployment of AI across firms will also benefit from further efforts to promote access to public data and facilitate trustworthy sharing of private data. And again, I mean, I understand that in Israel there's some particular sensitivities when it comes to privacy of data, but in this day and age and wanting to leverage AI to its full potential, I mean, these are things that will need to be worked through. On the plus side of the ledger, more broadly, I mean, Israel's significant investments in research and development, now at more than 6% of GDP, materially above any other OECD economy. And your vibrant venture capital markets have enabled Israel to become a global leader in entrepreneurship and technological innovation. AI-related startups accounted for almost half of all new high-tech startups, in the last few years. And in 2024, Israel was among the world's top 10 countries in terms of venture capital investments in AI startups, with almost $2 billion US in investments. And of course, Israel's high-tech industry does not just increase its prosperity, it also makes groundbreaking contributions to tackling problems and advancing human progress. From cybersecurity to agriculture to healthcare, Israeli innovations are tackling global issues such as water scarcity, food security, non-communicable diseases, and many more. But, as I said, there is scope to accelerate, to expand, and to deepen the diffusion of AI technology across the Israeli economy more broadly. Now, Israel's engagement with the OECD actually dates back all the way to 1963, with Israel's adherence to the first OECD instrument, the OECD Seeds schemes. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, and following a period of intense conflict and economic disruption, Israel intensified its alignment with OECD standards by implementing reforms to transform itself into an open, market-based economy, fostering stronger growth in the decades that followed. As part of its accession journey, Israel pursued further structural reforms across a broad range of policy areas, from education, trade, public budget management, tax and financial services, environmental policies, and more. For example, during the accession process, Israel enacted legislation to enhance openness to foreign investors in the insurance sector, to facilitate the cross-border provision of financial services by non-residents, ultimately helping to enhance Israel's business environment. But Israel's accession to the OECD has also in turn strengthened and brought new perspectives to our organization, while challenging us to better reflect these perspectives in our analysis. Israel is making important contributions to our substantive work, with a particular focus on advancing our work on innovation and on the digital economy-related policy cooperation. Israel chairs or vice chairs 5 OECD bodies working in these areas, with Israeli experts providing important guidance to our work on promoting the free flow of data across borders while ensuring trust, privacy, security, and intellectual property rights, including by chairing the task force underway to revise our 2007 recommendation on cross-border cooperation in the enforcement of laws protecting privacy. And Israel is also currently chairing the OECD's Working Party on Environmental Performance and Urban Policy, in which its contributions as a global leader in the reuse of wastewater and in the desalination of seawater are very much appreciated. There's much more that we can continue to accomplish working together to leverage every Israeli's potential to drive even stronger economic growth, to make sure that all Israelis can participate in and reap the tangible benefits of Israel's increased economic prosperity, to ensure Israel's long-term sustainability, and ultimately to lay the foundations for strong, stable, and inclusive growth and increased economic and social well-being for people in Israel and across the region more broadly. We share your hopes and aspirations for peace, for an end to the cycle of conflict that is causing tremendous sadness and suffering for people in Israel, but across the region more broadly, including, of course, we want to see the speedy return of the remaining hostages, for whom we just our heart goes out to those that, and the families of those who are still not reunited with their loved ones. In this complex global environment, the OECD continues to strive to bring countries and people together to talk to each other, to work with each other, to find common solutions to our shared economic, social, and environmental policy challenges, to engage with each other bilaterally but also multilaterally. And at the OECD, we, of course, continue with our strategies around global outreach and engagement, seeking to bridge advanced emerging and developing economies and broadening the reach of our best practices and providing our platforms for dialogue to help find the best possible ways forward. As an example, close to this part of the world, through our Middle East and North Africa regional program, we continue to work with our partners across the region who share an interest in international cooperation and economic reform to the benefit of all. So I very much look forward to continuing our work together over the next 10 years as we approach the 25th anniversary of Israel's membership of the OECD. I very much thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words here this morning, and I genuinely wish that you have a very positive, productive, and successful seminar, and I'm very pleased that despite my best efforts, I'm able to reach it and stop precisely at 0. Thank you.